Okay, you've been through the interview. You are professional. We haven't talked about dress, but you certainly need to go into that interview dressed professionally. And I don't think you need to go out and spend $500 on a new suit, but I think you need to come in with a pressed shirt, with pressed pants, trousers, skirt, with a neat appearance, okay? And that doesn't cost anything. But again, that's an impression. And you may go in and interview with someone that's a total slob, and it may not be as important. But if you're going to have contact with 5 or 6 people, they're looking at professionalism, okay? And education, teaching in particular, administration as well, has moved so far back towards that professional individual from where we were 10, 15 years ago. And, you know, those of us that there was a time when, you know, everybody wore blue jeans and whatever shirt they wore the night before that was all wrinkled. I mean, that was common. It's not that way anymore, and you need to be ready for that. Again, you don't have to go out and spend a lot of money on a new wardrobe, but I think you need to present yourself in a way that is professional. And again, community standards differ. Okay, so if you're interviewing in the city of Chicago for Chicago Public Schools, they still are looking for professional people, and maybe that new suit is more important there than it would be in Villa Grove, okay, because it's a small rural community, and not everybody walks down the street in a suit and tie, okay? So you got to kind of gauge that, but no matter what you do, dress professionally, act professionally, be ready as a professional, because you are. That's why you've spent the last 4.5, 5 years in school. Education is a profession. It's a profession where you are making an impression on students for the rest of their lives. And part of that is the appearance and the presentation that you make of yourself for them. Okay? Okay, you've been through the interview process. You are going to check with somebody. Yes, sir.
Sometimes perfume, cologne, sometimes you're in a small room. And if you come in and you smell like Paris, everybody may be tearing up, and they may not be concentrating. Well, Paris, I don't know how Paris Hilton smells, but Paris, the city. But, you know, I think that's just something you need to take into consideration.
Absolutely. All of those things play together. Absolutely. That's a good point.
I was going to say for the ladies, sometimes your skirts that you wear out on a date are just too short.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
Sometimes you've grown out of that particular blouse and your buttons are pulling. That's time maybe to go out. It doesn't have to be expensive, but make sure your costume fits. I notice at the job fair there are some times when I would like to go and redress you. Mm-hmm. Okay, you've got to come in a professional mode and looking comfortable as though your clothing fits and your skirts are probably to the knee at least.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. You know, I mean, I certainly like short skirts, but there is a professional aura that you do need to present. Okay, so, and again, you know, look at yourself in the mirror. Sometimes I wonder if people have a mirror. You know, look at yourself in the mirror, and if the hair isn't combed, if you know, if you got your shirt buttoned wrong, and that happens, you know, it blows my mind. I don't understand how that can happen. But, you know, look in the mirror, and you are who you are, and that's okay. But, you know, step it up a notch. You're trying to get a job. You're interviewing, and that's an important piece. Okay? Yes?
Off. I know someone told me negativity, talking about how you weren't happy at your school or your cooperating teacher
absolutely.
didn't do this. But
Absolutely.
Are there some things that you can think of that would turn you on or turn you off?
Well, again, the enthusiasm piece is a huge thing for me, and it is for most people. But you're exactly right. You know, don't talk negatively about any aspect of your job. You know, if you had a horrible cooperating teacher, and some of you do, I'm sure. Some people should not supervise student teachers. You know, they should not have a student teacher because they don't do a very good job. But anyway, don't tell the principal that you had a horrible student teaching experience unless that person has written an evaluation, and that evaluation is a required piece you don't have a lot of references to choose from because you don't have that background at this point. But you don't want to be negative. You don't want to talk badly about experiences, okay? The things that you do want to talk about, you don't have a lot of experiences. But, if you were a Sunday school teacher, you're a teacher, okay? And you've got some experience working up in front of kids. That's important. If you taught swimming lessons for the park district, that's teaching experience that you've had, okay? Use that. I'm happy to see that people are energetic and industrious and that you work the third shift at McDonald's for 3 years that you're in college because you needed the money. I understand that. But give me some things that relate to education. And you've all done something that relates to education, someplace. And that's an important piece because you don't have a lot of other things, okay? Put that down on the resume and bring that up. As an interviewer, I know that you haven't had a lot of time in a classroom. Student teaching is probably it. But give me some other things. And again, if you taught swimming lessons, when you were in high school, if you taught Sunday school when you were in high school, it tells me that you were kind of preparing for your career. Okay, that you wanted to teach. You wanted to be in front of people and help them. So those are important things. They don't seem like much, but they're important little pieces. Okay? Okay, after the interview is over and you walk out, there are going to be some things that you're going to think of that I wish I would have said this differently. I wish I would have done this differently, and now my opportunity is over, okay? I don't think there's anything wrong in going back and calling the principal and saying, there was one piece of the interview that I don't think I explained very well, and I would like to just give you my thoughts on it. I wouldn't do that in a long, drawn-out way, but that's not a bad thing, again, because it shows the interviewer that you're thinking about what happened and you're thinking about the opportunity that you have. And I would be very positive and say, I really enjoyed the interview today. It went well. I think I would be a good fit for your school. I think I'd be a good fit for the science department, for the third grade, whatever. And then say, there was one piece that I just wasn't comfortable with and I didn't really explain myself. And that's your opportunity to do that. If that isn't necessary, I would certainly, before you leave, you need to find out what the timelines are. And how soon is this job going to be filled? Assuming you're going to hire, assuming the principal is going to hire somebody out of the pool of candidates that were interviewed. And sometimes the interview process goes over 2 or 3 days, okay? So the decision might not be made today because there may be 3 more candidates coming in tomorrow and there may be 3 more coming in, next Tuesday, only because of scheduling problems. So don't be too concerned about that, but know that, and they'll tell you, the secretary will tell you, the principal will tell you, what the timelines look like. And the timelines are important because, hopefully you're going to have some other things going. Know when that process is supposed to end. And with that, underline this, know whether or not you will accept that position when the person calls. Talk to your significant other. Talk to your parents. If you're offered this position, if I'm offered this position, should I take it? And there may be more questions that you have. You may need to find out a few more things, but never ask the person to wait more than 24 hours for a decision, unless there's some extenuating circumstance, okay? If your significant other is being transferred into that community and that transfer isn't official yet and won't be, for a couple of days, you might explain that. But as a hiring principal, I don't want to wait. I want to get this position off the table and move on to the next one. So you've got to be ready. And it always kind of threw me for a loop when I would call somebody, offer them the position, and they weren't ready to make a decision. And maybe the decision is no, this is not the right situation for me. That's okay. That's all right, and you can feel honored that you were offered the position, but this isn't where I want to work for whatever reasons. It wasn't a good fit. It didn't feel good. And just be ready to go with that. And I would certainly respect that, and I would ask you what part of the fit didn't work so that I would know, why I'm losing a good candidate, and what I need to do in my building to maybe make some changes, to make some improvements. And it may be just a personality thing. That's possible. Each building has a personality. The longer I was at Central High School and in the hiring position, I'm sure the people started to have similar personalities. And I know my colleagues said the same thing, that we hire for what we see and what we like and how we feel, and somebody else may hire, totally differently. But that's why the building takes on the personality of the principal, especially if there's some longevity there. So if you don't hear anything for, when the time is expired, if they said they're going to make a decision by Friday at 4 o'clock and you haven't heard anything, I think Monday morning, I would call and say, I'm really interested. Has the position been filled yet? I need to move on if it has, so that I can look for some other opportunities. And they'll tell you. And usually, once they get an acceptance, and here again, the reason that you don't want to have a 2 or 3 or 4 day wait on accepting the position is I've got a second place person and a third place person out there probably, and if you're not going to take the position, I need to get to them and get them under contract, and the sooner the better. And if you're number 2 and you've got to wait a week before you know something, that's telling you you're number 2 or that there's something else going on. And I don't like that, because I want the person that I hire to feel like they were absolutely the best candidate out there. And sometimes I do hire the second person or the third person. But I still want them to feel like they were the number 1 most important person that interviewed for that. So have that information ready for you. Michelle?
Students have asked me what to do if they have another interview at another school that in a week.
Mm-hmm.
Can they say that to you, or does
Absolutely,
that bother you?
absolutely. I would like to know that. And in some cases you'll have 2 or 3 interviews all in the same week. That I've seen those situations. And when you're in some informal setting, tell the principal, that just for your information, and you have to do it in a very positive way, obviously, not to put pressure on that principal to make a decision today, but and I will often ask, do you have anything else going? Do you have any other opportunities? Do you have any other interviews set up? And that's a perfect time to tell, and there's nothing wrong with being upfront and forward. And in some cases, it gets us that are doing the hiring to move more quickly, because we've got a lot of stuff on our desk and we've got a lot of other things going on, and this is just one small piece of it, very, very important piece. But there are other things that we have to deal with, and that gets us to move along a little bit too. So yeah, if you have something else going, make sure that the person, the interviewer, knows that.
Along the same line, following the interview, make sure you send you would probably get to this, but make sure you send a follow-up thank you note, and do it fairly quickly after the interview, because again, there's not a lot of time. And I believe you usually suggest a handwritten note. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we get those, and it doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be involved, but just a small thank you note. That's just a touch of class. It's a touch of professionalism, I'll read it and I'll put the name to the person, and that gets filed, and I probably throw it away, but I saw it, and I know that you're interested, and I know you're the professional that's following up on this, and that interview was important to you. Okay, so do that. It costs you, the cost of a stamp and a note, but get it out. I would go home and write it right after the interview so that it's in the mail that day and gets there the next day or 2 days later. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Good point.